On January 18, 2024, a chilling discovery was made in the suburban neighborhood of Wahiawa, Hawaii. Paramedics arrived at the residence of Brandy and Thomas Bloss to find the lifeless body of 10-year-old Gianna Bradley. Her death was anything but natural. Bruises, signs of starvation, and evidence of restraint painted a grim picture of prolonged abuse. What made the case even more appalling was that the alleged perpetrators were not strangers. They were her legal guardians, the very people entrusted with her safety and well-being. Arrested at the scene were Brandy and Thomas Bloss, along with Gianna's grandmother, Deborah Jaron. The charges: second-degree murder, kidnapping, and unlawful imprisonment. But as more details surfaced, it became clear that this was not just a case of horrific child abuse. It was also an indictment of the state's child welfare system. Gianna Bradley was only 10 years old at the time of her death, but her story of resilience and hardship began much earlier. Before her guardianship with the Bloss family, Gianna was part of Hawaii's Child Welfare Services (CWS) system. In 2018, the Bloss family took her in as foster parents and later became her legal guardians. The family received monthly payments of $1,961 in permanency assistance, a state-funded program meant to support guardians and adoptive parents caring for vulnerable children. However, this money, which was meant to provide for Gianna's basic needs, appears to have been used for something far more sinister. Her tragic death would ultimately expose cracks in Hawaii's child welfare oversight and highlight the dangers of insufficient monitoring for children in guardianship care. For 2 years, Gianna lived under the care of the Bloss family. But somewhere along the way, things took a dark turn. Evidence suggests that Gianna's abuse was chronic, meaning it occurred over a sustained period of time. There were signs of malnourishment, untreated injuries, and possibly even torture. One of the most critical mistakes occurred in October 2022, when Brandy and Thomas Bloss began homeschooling Gianna. This decision effectively removed her from the protective eyes of teachers and school officials, people who are legally required to report any signs of abuse. Without the daily oversight of educators, Gianna was isolated and at the complete mercy of her guardians. There is evidence to suggest that Hawaii's Child Welfare Services may have failed to follow up on Gianna's welfare after she was placed with the Bloss family. Typically, child welfare agencies are required to conduct periodic home visits and welfare checks on children in foster or guardianship care. However, the state's policy on follow-up checks for legal guardians is often laxer than it is for foster parents. Once guardianship is formalized, oversight may drop significantly unless court-mandated reports are required. This lack of oversight likely contributed to the prolonged nature of the abuse. It's possible that no social worker, case manager, or welfare agent checked on Gianna for over a year. In that time, her suffering worsened, culminating in her untimely death in January 2024. What makes this case even more disturbing is that Brandy and Thomas Bloss may have used Gianna's health as a means to increase their financial support from the state. Court documents reveal that the Bloss family claimed Gianna suffered from schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. Mental health diagnoses like these are often used to justify higher payments for foster care or guardianship subsidies. However, child welfare advocates and experts in child psychology have questioned the legitimacy of these claims. Mental health conditions like schizophrenia and bipolar disorder rarely manifest in children as young as 10. Such diagnoses typically appear in late adolescence or early adulthood. If the Bloss family falsified Gianna's medical history, they may have been exploiting the system for financial gain. Investigators are now examining whether the family's claim of mental illness was a strategy to receive a higher monthly payment under the state's exceptional care provision. If so, it would not only demonstrate greed, but a calculated scheme that cost a child her life. January 18, 2024, will forever be marked as a day of heartbreak for Hawaii's Wahiawa community. It began like any other, but when first responders arrived at the Bloss residence, they encountered a scene that would haunt them for years. Gianna's small, fragile body bore the signs of long-term abuse. Investigators later revealed that she had been physically restrained, beaten, and deprived of basic necessities like food and medical care. Her injuries were consistent with severe physical trauma, and her body showed evidence of neglect. What began as a child in distress call quickly escalated into a homicide investigation. Police immediately arrested Brandy and Thomas Blas, along with Deborah Giron. The three were charged with second-degree murder, as well as kidnapping and unlawful imprisonment. As news of Gianna's murder spread, public outrage turned toward Hawaii's Child Welfare Services, CWS. How could a child under state supervision be placed in the hands of people capable of such abuse? Child welfare advocates and journalists began demanding answers. It was soon discovered that the Blas family had been approved as foster parents before becoming Gianna's legal guardians. This approval process typically requires background checks, home inspections, and periodic reviews of the child's condition. Yet it appears that at some point, the Blases were no longer being monitored. Critics argue that this gap in oversight was a systemic failure on the part of Hawaii's Department of Human Services and CWS. The state had a duty to ensure Gianna's safety, and many believe that if proper checks had been conducted, her abuse would have been discovered much sooner. Adding to the outrage is the revelation that a 4-year-old boy, also under the care of the Blas family, was found to be severely abused. This child, like Gianna, had been placed in the family's custody through the child welfare system. As the Blas family awaits trial, the Wahiawa community continues to mourn the loss of Gianna Bradley. Her face, once full of life, now serves as a stark reminder of the vulnerabilities within the foster and guardianship system. The charges against Brandy, Thomas, and Deborah are severe. If convicted of second-degree murder, they could face life in prison. The kidnapping and unlawful imprisonment charges further highlight the level of control they exerted over Gianna's life. Meanwhile, public pressure has mounted on Hawaii's Child Welfare Services to reform its practices. Activists are demanding stronger oversight for guardianship arrangements, mandatory welfare checks, and increased scrutiny of claims related to children's mental health needs. Gianna Bradley's story is one of betrayal, systemic failure, and the harrowing consequences of unchecked power. It exposes the flaws in child welfare oversight and challenges the state of Hawaii to take responsibility for its role in the tragedy. This case has prompted lawmakers, child welfare advocates, and concerned citizens to call for stricter monitoring of children placed in guardianship care. Activists argue that homeschool exemptions should be more strictly regulated, as they often allow abusers to shield their actions from the public eye. While it's too late to save Gianna, her story serves as a powerful warning. Without reform, more children like her could fall victim to the very systems designed to protect them. Her tragic death highlights the importance of vigilance, compassion, and the unyielding pursuit of justice. Rest in peace, Gianna Bradley. Your story will not be forgotten.